Hey, thanks for tuning in to Extreme Reloading, Episode 2, Season 11. And before I jump into the new stuff in this video, let me catch you up on what we're doing this season and what we talked about in Episode 1. Of course, you're invited to watch the entire Episode 1. And what we did in that episode, number one, did a quick review of the Accuracy International AXSA rifle that I'm reloading for this season. That is chambered in .308 Winchester. You can catch up on the details from that video. We also talked about reloading for that particular rifle. Talked about it in kind of general terms and specifically noted that we're going to be using 4 different powders this season. That is Varget, RL-15, Winchester's Staball Match, and Vitavuri N150. Now, I'm going to catch you up on what I have already done in this episode that I'm calling my Reloader's Journal. And I've already done load workups for all 4 of those powders. And the way that it worked out is I started with 2 powders that I already had on hand for other .308, other calibers that I'm loading for, and that is Varget and RL-15. Now I'm running low on RL-15 because I have not seen that available literally for years. I did contact Alliant to see, because there was the rumors online that RL-15 is completely discontinued. Well, that is not true. They actually responded within hours to my email and said, no, they haven't discontinued RL-15, so that's a good thing. However, they are having problems sourcing nitrocellulose, and that, as you know, is the primary component of smokeless powder, and they are having problems getting it. I also understand, they didn't say this, but I also understand that a lot of these powder manufacturers are, whenever they get nitrocellulose, a lot of that powder is going straight to the military efforts, and we're talking about things happening in Europe, Ukraine, all around the world. And so we're kind of playing second fiddle. We get the leftovers, and so RL-15 is really, really hard to get. But I'm still loading and testing for it. So I started off with those 2 powders that I had in hand, and I did a load workup for Varget and RL-15. Now specifically the Varget loading, I loaded and worked up a load for my 2 bullets that I'm interested in. That is the 167 grain Lapua Skener or Sinar load, a bullet. And the second one is my tried and true 168 grain Sierra tipped Match King bullet. I'm using Lapua cases on this and CCI Bench Rest 2 large rifle primers, seeding those bullets with my Redding competition bullet seeding die. And I started off with 40.3 grains of Varget and worked it up through 43.0 grains of Varget. And that was done for both of those bullets. So I ended up with 20 rounds, 10 rounds each. And then I went out and I fired those 20 rounds. And I, of course, watched the velocities and I watched the pressures on that. Not a problem for pressures on any one of those, so that is a really good sign. I also did a load workup with RL-15, but this one I loaded only with the Lapua bullets. And here again, I used 10 rounds for that load workup, starting with the same 40.3 grains, working it up through 40.3 grains. Now these 2 powders have very similar burn rates, not exactly the same, but as it turns out, this range that I used is within the min and max range indicated in the reloading manuals that I was using. And once again, no problems at all with pressure, velocities, any of that sort of stuff. Now what's interesting is when I went out and shot these load workups, again, 10 shots in each of these things, I ended up with these actually quite nice groups, 10-shot groups, even though the powder charges varied by several grains. What we're looking at here is the 10-shot group from the Lapua bullets. That 10-shot group, this is the load workup, remember, already gave me a 0.87 sub-MOA 10-shot group. The load workup, again with Varget and the Sierra bullets, 0.93 10-shot group. For RL-15, again using the Lapua bullets only in this case, same group that it got when shooting the Varget load workup, 0.87 10-shot group load workup. Again, this is not shooting for groups necessarily. But then, of course, I did choose a particular powder charge and went out and shot 5-shot groups. Now, what was that powder charge that I used? Let's take a look at the results of this load workup. And what we're seeing here is a graph showing the powder charge on the x-axis and the muzzle velocities that I was getting for each of those bullets. The Sierra tipped Match King bullets being a little bit longer bullet, seated more deeply into the case, occupying a little bit more of that case volume. And because of that, it does routinely give me slightly higher velocities. It is in that green line on the top above the blue line, which is the Lapua velocity curve. Now, what I'm interested in, and this has worked for me so many times, I look for what's called the sill. That's that flat spot where the velocity of one particular powder charge is the same or really, really similar to another subsequent powder charge. And we see that here just there at the 42.1, and the next powder charge 0.3 of a grain higher, 42.4 grains. That optimal charge weight sill appeared in the exact same place for both the Lapua and the Sierra bullets. That is a very good sign. For the RL-15 powder, now we're looking at the graph again just for the Lapua bullet, and its sill appears between or at the 42.4 grain and 42.7 grain powder charge. What's also interesting is by examining the bullet tracks and what I call the Doppler method of identifying a powder charge, 42.7 was a very good-looking powder charge, what we call a well-behaved bullet. If you're interested in that approach, the Doppler approach, we have a video out on that entire process. There will be a link, or there is a link in the description below, and you can catch up on that. Well, then, as I said, I went out and shot 5-shot groups for the Varget and RL-15 powders. And for these, I used 42.3 grains of Varget, 42.6 grains of Reloader 15. Ended up with average or mean muzzle velocities for that 5-shot group of 2668 feet per second. For the Sierra bullets, a little bit slower, as anticipated, for the Lapua bullets, 2662 feet per second. For Reloader 15, overall, a little bit slower than Varget, which is interesting because it had a higher powder charge. We'll talk about that later. But here we see 2,612 feet per second for the Sierra bullets, and again, a little bit slower, fairly slower, 2,558 was the mean muzzle velocity for the Lapua bullets. The extreme spread measured in MOA for the Sierra bullets using Varget and for Reloader 15 gave me identical results, about 3/4 MOA, 0.74 MOA to be exact. And then for the Lapua, got much tighter groups, much lower dispersion on those, and we had 0.38 for the Varget powder and 0.93. Well, the Varget powder performed much better with the Lapua bullets, but worse with the RL-15 powder charge. In all cases, it is sub-MOA. However, I'm actually expecting something quite a bit better out of this Accuracy International rifle. And I'll note now that some of my earlier testing, not with reloads, but earlier testing with factory loads, like the Lapua Skenner bullets, the same ones that I'm using here, the 167 grain Skenner or CNR bullets, I was averaging 0.61 MOA, and I've got about 5 or 6 different 5-shot groups fired with that factory ammo under different environmental conditions. Now, I also like to look at what's called mean radius, and that is a really tedious and cumbersome measurement to make if you're doing it by hand. But the relatively new Hornady Fordolf app with the group analysis package installed on it makes it so easy, ridiculously easy to calculate mean radius. And so I'm doing that now on a regular basis. And what we're seeing is that the Sierra tipped Match King bullets are giving me a mean radius of about 0.23 inch with Varget powder, 0.27 inch with Reloader 15, and then once again with the Lapua bullets and the Varget powder, again really good in overall dispersion, extreme spread, really good for the mean radius. And here we have a mean radius of 0.24 inch, but nowhere near as good under the Reloader 15, where our mean radius is 0.31 of an inch. So my goal for this loading is to be able to surpass that factory ammo. And some of the best factory ammo I shot, as I already alluded to, is that Lapua factory ammo. So I really want to get better than, consistently better than that 0.6 MOA. And in this instance, so far, we haven't been able to do it. Now, I will mention that this is just one 5-shot group under a specific powder charge setting. So we're not anywhere close to done with these things. But, as I said in my first video, episode 1, I'm interested in experimenting with some additional powders. So, I got my hands on 2 new powders I haven't used before. Winchester's Staball Match, a spherical powder, very interested and intrigued in that one. And the second one is N150. So I did the same thing. I did the load workup on these 2 different powders, and I actually loaded 12 rounds for the Staball Match, starting at 42.7 grains and working all the way up to 46 grains. Now you might be saying, holy smokes, you started at 42 some grains and went all the way up to 46 grains. That's a tremendous powder charge. Well, it's a spherical powder, and actually I thought there might have been an error in the reloader's manual, so I contacted Hodgdon, that is distributing. I think they're actually making this powder for Winchester, and they responded and said, no, everything's correct. It's a very different type of powder, and what you're seeing as minimum and maximum charges, that's what you should be using. So, cool. I went ahead and did that. So I shot the load workup for both the Sierra and the Lapua bullets, and while all of the Sierra bullets recorded very, very nicely with my chronograph, not all of the Lapua bullets recorded with that chrono. So I don't have all records on that. but we have plenty of data there to make good decisions on what powder charge to use moving forward, at least what to start with. What we're looking at here is the very similar powder charge and velocity curve Sierra bullets, and we see a pretty nice optimal charge weight for both of those bullets appearing at the 44.8 to about the 45.1 or 45 grain powder charge of Staball Match. So I decided to move forward with a powder charge of 44.9 grains, kind of nestled nicely inside that optimal charge weight sill. One more powder though, that's the Vihtavuori N150. This is another cylindrical or stick type powder, and looking at it, it's kind of a chunky powder, certainly a chunkier powder than Varget. Now I had intended to load 10 rounds in this load workup ranging from 41.0 through 44.6 grains with that Sierra tipped Match King. However, I noticed that I started compressing that powder charge after about round 7, and so I backed off at that point, and then when I did my load workup shooting at the range, that's why we're seeing only 7 rounds being fired. That group, load workup group, didn't look too bad. It's not great though, but again, you know, this is much more common that we see a load workup because you have all the different velocities, all the different powder charges, that it kind of really opens up. So I'm not too worried about N150. I'm certainly not going to discount it at this point. It's just the load workup. So looking at that similar powder charge velocity curve graph, we see 2 very nice sills appearing there at 42.2 through 42.6 grains, and then another one, after a little bit of a jump there, another one appearing at 43 through 43.4 grains. And so what I decided to do, I'm going to choose the powder charge to give me a little bit more velocity, that second optimal charge weight sill. I'm going to load, did load 5 more rounds with N150 at 43.2 grains. Then headed back out to the range and shot 2 more 5-shot groups with each of those bullets. The results of that are what we're looking at right now. In fact, we're looking at the results of all of these different load workups. I really like the fact that the Staball Match is giving us a very nice velocity, 2,700 feet per second for both the Lapua and the Sierra bullets. I really like that. Getting a nice velocity with the N150 also. The extreme spread or dispersion measured in MOA, very nice for Staball Match, and the Sierra bullets, not so nice with the Lapua bullets. And then, you know, the N150, it really opened up, almost an MOA sized group. But again, we're not done. If I quit right now after just one 5-shot group, I might be missing something. I've got the powder, got plenty of bullets in this case, so what I'm doing now in the upcoming episodes of Extreme Reloading, we are going to be doing a second shoot for groups, 4 5-shot groups with the Sierra bullets and each of those 4 different powders. Another time we're going to be going back out, 4 more 5-shot groups, Lapua bullets, those same 4 powders at these optimal charge weight powder charge settings that we just talked about. Well, that gets you up to date pretty darn well on what I've been up to, that entire process that got me to where I am today, and I really hope you'll be joining us for our subsequent episodes of Extreme Reloading, loading for the Accuracy International AXSA rifle. Hey, if you've got some questions, comments, observations, go ahead and pop those into the comments section below. And as always, Thank you very much for watching.